Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Very excited to be here today and talk to you about the predictive features in SAP Business Objects Cloud. So let's go briefly over the agenda. I'll give a very high-level overview of our cloud offering, followed by a demo on the guided machine discovery feature and time series forecasting. We'll briefly touch upon the SAP HCP predictive services, and we conclude the webinar with a Q&A session. SAP Business Objects Cloud is SAP's newest SaaS offering that brings together predictive, BI, and planning. And of course, today's focus is going to be on predictive, but I want to very briefly touch upon our other pillars, the other functionality that we are offering to you in the cloud. So what are the key value propositions? All analytics capabilities are combined in one product. We have consumer-grade user experience. You will see that our user experience is Fiori-based. It has a very modern look and feel. Of course, SaaS is offered in the cloud. That means no installation is required. And it's based on our high-performance real-time platform. So it's based on HCP, the HANA Cloud Platform, offering to you all results in real time. And the reason why we brought in predictive functionality into our cloud offering is so that we have one analytics experience for all users. And we are targeting with our predictive functionality not only the data scientists, not only the few people in an organization who may have a PhD in math or statistics. No, what we wanted to do with our offering, we wanted to bring the predictive, bring machine learning, bring the power of machine learning to the business users, to everyone in the organization, by providing collaboration among all users. And I will show you a couple of examples how you can collaborate with your colleagues in our offering. So with this, let me transition to a very high-level architectural slide. So what you see here is at the top we see the SAP Digital Boardroom. If you're interested in that, we also have webinars on that topic. So the Digital Boardroom is sitting on top of our cloud offering, and as I mentioned before, we have BI, planning, predictive analytics, and in the future we will have GRC that focuses on enterprise risk. These capabilities are all based on our core functionality, and in this core functionality we have very strong data connectivity and modeling capabilities, very strong visualization and geospatial capabilities, and I'll show you a few examples of stories that we have created in our cloud offering during the demo. I already touched upon collaboration, and of course predictive analytics is based on a strong advanced analytics core, and lastly we have also auditing and monitoring. These capabilities are sitting on our HCP platform, and with this platform we can actually connect to on-premise and of course also cloud data sources. So your data resides in HANA, your data resides in a different data source. We already offer a variety of connections to data sources. So what we wanted to do with our predictive offering, we didn't want to have it just stand alone, but we also wanted to embed it into BI, into planning. So embed it in these functionalities to really bring it to the BI user, to bring it to the planning user, and target the business user and data scientist. And we started by targeting the business user with our first offerings. So with this, let me jump into the BI. So let me briefly jump into BI, then planning, and then finally go into the details of predictive analytics. So in the area of BI, the three main areas that I see is really the data connection. Of course, without data is the most important part of any BI solution. The best BI solution wouldn't be able to work without access to data. So here here you see a screenshot of our data preparation capabilities. You can prepare and model cloud and on-premise data just within your browser. We are supporting data connections from SAP, such as BW, HANA, HCP, and universes, as well as also non-SAP data sources. And we support linking of aggregated data, which is a very handy feature when you create stories. In the middle, you see a great example of a geo visualization that is based on the SG maps that are coming with our offering. And here you can really design, visualize, and create your own stories. We have a variety of visualization available, including geo, including financial charts. And with this, you can really personalize your dashboard view. And finally, once you've created the information, once you created the content that's relevant for you, you can share it with the team. You can share it with the rest of the collaboration, with the rest of the of your colleagues by collaborating with your team and then taking action on your data. So that kind of is a very high-level summary of our BI offering. Of course, we have full webinars that just drill into the details of these functionalities. So next, let's move on to planning. And in the planning area, our 3 areas of focus are really simplification, experience, and trust. It's a modern interface that allows you to create calculation and create planning models on the fly. So when it comes to planning, people often used Excel sheets and had different versions, and all that can be done now in our cloud offering, where people in the organizations can create their own private planning versions, and then once they're satisfied with the numbers, they can then convert them into public versions and share them with their colleagues. And with this, with contractor data, we of course collect various types of information, and we want to know what influences whether or not contractors are on budget after they completed the contract. Before I jump into that, just want to briefly show you an example of one of the stories that one of my colleagues created, including this really nice geo map. So for the purpose of this presentation and demo, I'm going to go now to the pages part. And here I'm going to be picking a new data set. So I'm going to pick an existing model, and this model is called Field Class Predictive. Again, as I mentioned, it contains the contractor data, so information about our temporary workers, and I would like to now run my guided machine discovery on these contractors. So here you see, well, we know, for example, we know the budget, we know how much of the budget is consumed, and I'm curious to learn more about that. And I can also exclude any of the columns. So for example, I can exclude budget on track. And here this is a very nice feature which makes the next screen much more intuitive, since I know that each of my record is called contractor. So let me just replace then the term record with contractors. Okay, with this I just need to click run, and what we're doing now in the background, we are leveraging the HCP predictive services, running sophisticated machine learning technology in order to extract insights into the data. And for those of you who are familiar with our predictive on-prem offering, it is actually internally using the EPL, the automated predictive library, that you can also benefit from when you have HCP Predictive Analytics installed. Okay, with this, we already get a result, so it only takes a few seconds. And I just want to highlight a couple of things here first. Up here, we always show the insight quality. We show how well are the patterns actually present in the data. So the insight quality is good. We also show the number of key influences. So out of the 19 columns that we have included in the data set, it seems that 11 of them are key influencers and one. Okay, so what we see here now is that the first, or the dimension and measure that has the biggest influence on the percentage of budget consumed is actually the supervisor name. So let's have a closer look at that. And we see, for example, that the supervisor with the name Udovic has the highest budget on average. Actually, he or she is consuming more than 20%. Okay, so let me just back up for a second. So here here I was mentioning that we can see an overview chart that shows you the measures and dimensions that have the highest impact, the highest influence on your percent of budget consumed. And once I clicked on the supervisor name, we actually were able to see the various supervisors and what kind of influence they have on the budget. And so we see, for example, that this first person actually is on average 20% above budget, and which is actually substantial, given that the overall average is only 97 or 96%. So now, going from the average, we can also go to the count. In the count here, we see actually the number of people that this particular supervisor has managed, and how many of them were above budget. In addition to that, you can see, for example, what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring the insights to you, not only with intuitive charts, but also with natural language. So for example, here you can see that additional information that 97% of contractors with the supervisor have above budget consumed, or that 58% of the contractors actually that have above budget, so all these gray guys, all these gray segments here, they have, out of these gray segments, we can see that only 19% fall into this particular category. So what you can do is, bringing in your own data, you can then identify the insights automatically. So all I had to do is point to the data, ask the question by pointing to a particular column, and then I was able to get insights. So now that's great that we have now insights with respect to one influencer. But what about combinations? What about the combination of supervisor name and rating? And this is where we can see here, for example, that the combination that this particular supervisor tends to also have employees with fairly low ratings. So a lot of people in the area will have a rating of 1, but then also a rating of 2 to 4. And again, I can click on these cells in the heat map in order to get more information. And for example, here I can see that on average this cell is 26% higher when it comes to this combination of supervisor and low performing employee. So now the insight that we can gain is actually, maybe it's not the employee that is low performing, or but maybe it's the supervisor that consistently underestimates the budget when hiring an employee or when hiring a contractor. So let's say I want to share now this information with my colleagues, and there are a couple of options that I have. First of all, I can, let me actually start with one of the things that I really like. So what I can do now is I can actually start here a new conversation, and I can invite a participant. So let me see who I invite, and who of my colleagues I'm going to send a message very early in the morning. Okay, I'm going to send one to Rao. And I say, what are you going to see? Rao. Okay, we click the we create the conversation and say, hi Rao, do you know more about this situation? And by sending him the message, I didn't just send him the message, but I also sent him a link to the story so that he's actually aware of the context and he has actually access to the data, and then he can analyze it and then get back to me or share it or do whatever he needs to do. So that's one way of collaborating. Then the next thing that I can do is, so I just highlighted this chart, I can also pin it now to a new Canvas page. So I can just say here, copy to new Canvas page, and what we can see here, it has created now a new page for me with this particular visualization. So these are just a couple of options that we have in terms of sharing. Okay, with this, let me go back to my presentation. As I mentioned before, this is just the first part. Of course, we continue to invest in this area, and one of the next things that we are looking into is our what-if scenarios and running simulations using what-if scenarios so that the business user can investigate multiple scenarios, again, using an intuitive graphical user interface instead of having to write formulas. Then in the long-term future, we also want to bring in capabilities for the data scientists such that the data scientists can create content and share that with the business user so that the business user can interact with the predictive content and can basically use it along the lines of self-serve predictive, where the data scientist has defined the framework and the parameters, and the business user can then navigate within this framework. Okay. So with this, I had mentioned before that we also brought in some planning, predictive into planning, and I'm going to go into my second demo. So for the second demo, I'm going to be using a slightly different data set. I'm going to be using the same story, but a different data set. Here we're looking at Concur travel data. And what I'll do is here now I create a new page, and in this case I'm gonna create a grid. A grid is a great framework that allows you to really dig into the details of the data. And I'm gonna be picking here Concur predictive model that shows me the different travel expenses for my different departments. Once this is loaded, and just as I mentioned, this is actually a now planning functionality. I can actually I can add, for example, here I can let me add here the time dimension. So the time dimension allows me to break down now my forecasting, or let me break down my expenses by time by the various categories. So for example, communication fees, etc. So now I can click on one of these cells and I can say create a predictive forecast. And when I do that, what we are here internally doing now is we pick the data, and we actually have the data available until 2016. So let me just briefly go back here and scroll over to 2016. And so we have the data available until May 2016. And so we're going to pick that, and we're going to want to forecast the travel expenses now for the rest of the year. So all I need to do is to click preview. And again, in the background, what we're doing is we're leveraging now the HTTP predictive services that include time series forecasting in order to find the time series model that best fits your data. No need to choose between different time series models, no need to do anything manually, but it's all done automatically here in the UI. And here we first can see in tabular form the numbers, but we can also see, and that's my favorite part up here, is in graphical way, what is the forecast and what is my confidence interval. Okay, so since this is data that I would like to bring into my planning model, all I need to do is to click OK, and it will copy the data into my planning model, and then I can deal with this data the same way as with any planning data. I can change it, I can share it, I can create a public version out of it, and so on. So if you want to know more about that, I encourage you to join one of our planning webinars where our planning experts can share with you all the functionality that we currently have available in our planning area. So with this, let me go back to the presentation. So just a very quick reminder, this is basically what we have gone over so far. We went over the different areas, the BI, planning, and predictive analytics, and how we embedded predictive analytics in planning. And of course, we continue to invest. We will expand the functionality in planning. We'll also bring in some functionality into BI. I've mentioned now the HCP predictive services probably a few times too many. So let me mention it one more time and actually give you a little bit more details in terms of what we are offering in that area. So right now with the HCP predictive services that can also be subscribed to independent of our cloud offering, you have the ability to create time series forecasts, determine key influences, identify outliers, perform what-if, model-based what-if simulations, and apply scoring. And these services are RESTful services deployed in HCP. So they're really targeted towards a developer that wants to embed predictive in their HCP application. But of course, internally at SAP, we also make use of these services, such as in the two demos that I was just showing you before. So now you're probably wondering, well, SAP has an on-prem portfolio and the HCP predictive services and predictive analytics, so who's for what? So just to give you a very brief overview of the different offerings, we just released our SAP Business Objects Predictive Analytics 3.0, which is our on-prem offering that's targeted towards the business users and data scientists. A very strong offering that allows you to create, consume, and operationalize predictive models. And if you're interested in to learn more about that, we have lots of information available on SCN. This is really predictive for the business user to interact with their business content. And then finally, the HCP predictive services that are targeted to the developer to embed predictive functionality in their HCP application. So with this, I would like to conclude the webinar and open the floor for questions.
What algorithms are used with the guided machine learning option? And if you could elaborate on that.
So what we are using internally is regression and classification that's coming directly from our in-database predictive library called Automated Predictive Library that implements very strong machine learning driven classification, regression, and other types of predictive algorithms. But in this case, for guided machine discovery, we're making use of the classification and regression, and then of course for the time series forecasting, we make use of the time series forecasting that's included in there.
Does Business Objects Cloud cover all functionality or similar equivalent functionality like the on-premise equivalent products, for example, BI Platform, Webby, Crystal, and so on?
As SAP, we are continuing to invest in both on-premise and of course in the cloud as well. Right now, our cloud offering is not doesn't have the same functionality or features as our on-premise offering.
Are the predictions based on statistical regression models?
Yeah, definitely. The guided machine discovery is using for measures. We are definitely using machine learning. We are using a machine learning regression model in order to gain the insights.
Does Business Objects Cloud include options for preparing data like excluding, runaways, or filling gaps in data, or is there any type of documentation which requirements have to be met from the data to get valuable results?
So we are actually heavily investing on the data preparation area and expect to see some exciting new features to come in that area. So for the details, we are in terms of filling in missing values, there are the abilities to change values and replace values. And then for the runaways, you can create calculations. So it would really depend on on the exact kind of formula you would like to use for dealing with runaways. But we definitely have calculations included, and as well as in the planning model, very sophisticated capabilities to deal with the values in your data.
So, question on the modeling, Flavia, who creates it?
So in terms of creating the data model, we have a couple of different options. So you can, for example, just point to an existing Excel sheet and CSV file, and then we automatically create a model for you. So very, very easy. You can point to existing HANA and other models. If you would like to create for example, more in detailed planning model, then maybe somebody who's more familiar on the data modeling side is creating the model, but it really depends on the data source, whether the data source is already modeled, and what you would like to do with the data once it's in the cloud. As I said, like for planning models, it's probably somebody who is more familiar with the data modeling side, because planning models are quite complex. For other models, they can be, we really support you using the UI in terms of the model creation, and it's very simple to create these models.
We have Business Object Cloud access, but predictive services are currently unavailable. Do we need to pay extra to get these services active?
So, as I mentioned before, like the predictive, with our SAP Business Objects Cloud offering, the HCP predictive services, they come with it depending on your license. So if you have a license for just BI, so let me quickly go back here. In terms of licensing, these are the different options that we have. You can either have a license just for BI and predictive, or for BI, predictive, and planning. And then also there's the planning professional user. So I would suggest that you check what type of user, what type of license you have. And if you have a license that you feel should include predictive, please reach out to us and we can support you there.
Question is on merging different data sources.
We definitely offer offer merge functionality, but it really depends on the type of data sources, which one is online, which one is offline. So we would have to better understand the scenario. So I suggest, again, to reach out to us, and then we can go into the details of your question to really understand what data sources you have available, and whether the merge functionality is currently available or whether we are still working on it.